Well, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. Hope you had a great weekend. Okay, on to the first program of the day and indeed our first subject. Let's look at the bombing gone wrong. Speaking about the recent mistaken drone bombing in Kaduna State, and after investigations by the Army has put two officers on a court-martial, proceeding, and that, as you know, is the military's version of a criminal court. The much that has been said is that it was a mistake and that it was wrong, and that the Army is going this way seems to mean that they suspect at least criminal culpability. Okay, our guest to help us understand this, former military officer, former deputy head of security at the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa, and adjunct professor George C. Marshall, European Center for Security Studies in Germany, and private security consultant nowadays, private security and defense consultant trainer, Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, retired. A fine morning to you, Group Captain.
Good morning, Mr. Rory. Good morning, viewers.
Indeed. Our pleasure to be here. Let me get your general comments on the court-martial, because we all know what happened. It was a tragedy. It was tragic. Armless, civilians were the casualty of this mistake, because it has been called as much by the Army itself. But they have now put two officers on trial. What can you tell us about this? Because the Army itself has been quite tight-lipped about it, beyond the fact that there is a court-martial, and that because it is before a competent court, the spokespeople don't want to say much more about it.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, first, to say my understanding of the statement from the defense spokesman, one is that the military very courageously, I must say, has come out to accept that the bombing was a mistake. And in that mistake, they found that some personnel maybe have been found wanting. Having said that, first, as a former military officer myself, this incident reminds me and reminds all other people still in uniform of the hazards of the job. The hazards of the military man is that he goes to defend other citizens, sometimes even putting his life at risk. But at the same time, when he is found not to have used the instrument of violence in a way that training or military professionalism demands, unfortunately, again, despite the yeoman's work that he is doing, the system will have to meet out some sections. So on that aspect, as a professional, it's like a doctor who has done 100 operations. One day, if he's unlucky, he might go and put too much anesthesia on a patient, and the patient will die, and then they will take him to court. It happens. Every profession has its own risk. This is the risk. So I sympathize with the personnel who are going to be tried. I said who are going to be tried, because in the statement, I am not aware that the court-martial has started. I think what the man said is the intention of the military, after their due investigation, to do this court-martial, because probably because of their finding. When an incident happens in the military, they do what is board of inquiry initially.
Indeed.
And that board of inquiry will find whether the person being suspected, as of that time, there is no accused. It is just an investigation. And what the Board of Inquiry in the military does is to find out that thing that happened. Did it really happen? If the answer is in the affirmative, then now they look for who to blame. And in apportioning blame, because I just want to slightly correct, I have something about criminal culpability. Not really criminal culpability. What the military Board of Inquiry does is to bring out three kinds of responsibilities. First, it will find out whether the person will culpably negligent. Culpable negligence. Why is culpable negligence? That is, the person has been trained, has been given the correct equipment, has been given all the necessary to carry out a task, and he negligently didn't carry out a task. That is the worst finding that a board of inquiry can find. The second next finding is excusable negligence. Excusable negligence is where a personnel has been ordered to carry out a task, but the system itself has not given him enough training or the appropriate equipment, and he made a mistake. That's excusable negligence. And the military also recognizes a third level of involvement, which is an act of God. An act of God is that in the incident, it is found the person is well trained, he's given all the equipment, he has applied the training that he has received, but despite something out of his control, something happened. So I think it's based on that, then the military will say we are moving up to a court martial. We do not know under these three what these people will face. But like I said, I sympathize with them, but I must commend, the moral courage of the military to accept that. With due respect, by the work that I do, I follow every incident of collateral damage. Because I am an expert, I'm also a trainer on rules of engagement on collateral damage and so on and so forth. I owe it a duty, I trace all of them. It is very rare. In most cases, what the military does, with even police, collateral damage with police, is that we follow the rules of engagement, or sometimes even insist that, in fact, the one in Nasarawa, which is unfortunate, even the governor came out to say that it was an unknown drone. Saying it's an unknown drone is not fair to the people that were killed. So acknowledging is what is always recommended. Acknowledgement, is a human thing to do. This is a Nigerian military, which through whether mistake or negligence killed a Nigerian citizen who is also the taxpayer. So the least that the security force can do is to acknowledge, yes, Mr. A or Malam A or Chief so was a living person living in this particular area on this particular day. We did an operation and we mistook him and he lost his life, or he lost his shop, or he lost his leg. Acknowledgement is a very human thing. But like I said, in the past, that's why I congratulate the current crop of leadership, because I am sure, I don't have to be there, that so many discussions have gone, should we accept, should we not accept? But at long last, moral courage prevailed, and they came out to say, not like we see in the past, that we are responsible, and they acknowledge. So the other steps to be done, when this happened, you acknowledge, they have done investigation, they have shared part of the result of the investigation. They will, again from that, we expect there will be remedial actions. Because when a mistake is concerned, three things must have happened. Either it is a mistake in procedure, a lack of training, or inappropriate, so many things. The investigation will find out, and then what do you do so that it doesn't happen? And then this final one, the court martial, which to me is not the most important. It's not the most important. The purpose of an investigation, first and foremost, is to ensure it does not happen. But along the way, unfortunately, my colleagues may face sanction. The sanction may be severe, may be mild. And then finally, compensation. Compensation for those people who were wronged. Those that are dead, you look for the next of kin, or people that are involved, and pay compensation to them. This is strictly how a collateral damage incident is handled. This is the procedure that is recommended all over the world. Militaries do it. Our own military is also joining this something. Because incidentally, it happened the same week that this spokesman said the United States military released a result of a collateral damage incident in which only one person was killed. It happened in 2 years back. The report was just released just about the same time we had our own. So what does that show you? That is the global best practice. And we hope, going forward, first, we hope there won't be collateral damages. But nobody can assure you that in a military environment you will not have collateral damage. It happens to the best armed forces. It happens to the rest of the armed forces. It will happen. But how you handle it is the issue. Leveling up with the civilians, what it does is that it improves civil-military relations. Because the people will feel, in fact, I've had the interview with some of the villagers in Tudumbiri, it was in Hausa, in BBC. In fact, some of them were surprised that even the military accepted, and it gave them confidence. What does that do? It improves civil-military relations from the people and the military personnel.
Now, this must be very, very important to the army because, usually armed forces are highly interested in maintaining a cordial relationship with civilians, especially when in relative peace times. You know what I mean. And this thing that happened in the northwestern Tudumbiri, it's been described as that event. The army has spoken about, well, the spokesman, Edward Buba, Director of Defense Media Operations, Edward Buba, has said that painstaking investigations have been conducted. And after those painstaking investigations, this was because it was an event of monumental proportions. After all, up to 85, in the region of 85 Nigerians, unarmed, not in any kind of a war situation, are reported to have lost their lives as a result. Now that the army has now determined or decided, following its painstaking investigation, that soldiers, men in uniform, shall face a court-martial, it seems to me that the army is going to, quote-unquote, err on the side of caution, not going to arrive at any judgments itself that, oh, this could happen. No, it's not that. It's that clearly there were human beings at the end of the operational line that led in this calamity. And by the way, you could clear this up. This wasn't as a result of Nigerian Air Force planes, overflying the area, was it? The drone attack, well, attack it is, but it wasn't meant to be an attack. Those people died of friendly fire. This drone attack, does that suggest human beings remotely positioned, controlling those implements of war, and theoretically at least, until it is established beyond any shadow of doubt, could have, made a mistake? I'm glad that you referred to the different kind of scenarios, culpable, negligence, and all of those other ones. Is this beginning to lead in that direction, that it is wanted that a court-martial shall determine if there was any human input into this that was not entirely, completely professional?
Yes, exactly. Like I pointed out, the board of inquiry, that the inquiry or the investigation is the board of inquiry, still the same thing, must have found that any of these three things have happened. Either it is a culpable negligence, whether excusable negligence, whether it is an act of God. It is based on that the military can proceed to call for a court-martial. So like I said, of course, the level of any sanction that will be meted will depend whether it is at the higher end or at the lower end of culpability. Like I explained, you can see even the spokesman, he is reticent because, yes, definitely as a military man himself, he knows it could be him also facing that trial. So there is that sympathy. But at the same time, there is also the need to show that the people that were killed, they also matter, and that the military wants to be seen as a military that behaves very professionally. So it is a very delicate balance act, but I think the military got their call right.
At this stage, let's play the report that we put out earlier on this particular story. And then we'll come back to our conversation.
Survivors of the drone strike that killed scores of rural dwellers in Tudumbiri, Kaduna State can now find closure as the military authorities admit that its troops got it all wrong. Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Edward Buba, says investigations into the incident has been concluded.
The military has conducted a painstaking investigation into the Tudumbiri incident that occurred in Kaduna State and has initiated disciplinary action against those that we found culpable. Accordingly, the affected personnel are to face a court-martial for acts of omission or commission with respect to the Tudumbiri incident.
The drone strike occurred as the villagers were celebrating a religious festival on the 3rd of December last year.
The incident was a mistake, and the victims of the strike were mistaken for terrorists.
General Buba also explains ongoing operations against terrorists in the north central of the country and gives reasons for the withdrawal of troops at Forward Operating Base Alawa in Niger State.
Troops encountered improvised explosive devices, and this was at Maganda Junction. And at that event, 2 soldiers were killed, while 5 others were wounded in action. Now, based on these occurrences, there was a quick need to change tactics in order to maintain the tactical advantage and also in order to have better operational effectiveness. Accordingly, troops in Forward Operational Base Alawa were tactically withdrawn to nearby Forward Operational Base Pandogari.
Despite the withdrawal, troops still launch and sustain onslaught on identified targets. The military authorities say troops will sustain the offensive until its mandate of stamping out terrorism in the country is achieved. Sifon Asian, TVC News, Abuja.
Okay, so then, Group Captain, as you were saying, this is being taken very, very seriously. And let me go back to the question of, well, first of all, I just recall what you said at the top, that you commend the armed forces for taking this route, for the boldness, the courage in standing up and saying, as a matter of fact, they've gone as far as even saying that it was wrong. So, I mean, that much is determined from the very beginning. That is the headline, that the military, the Nigerian military, did something wrong. The next step is what you have helped us to outline, whether culpability exists. Now, let me go into the difference between, in days of yore, when there would be an overflying aircraft, a bomber, a striker, or whatever it is that it is professionally called, aircraft, that has direct line of sight with the target, and this particular instance, you saw in that report, we saw in that report, a device that, has to be a drone. As we all know, a drone is monitored remotely. So the person could have been, quite far away from the actual, scene of the incident. How these are modern ways of combat and warfare, and these are probably different from things that happened in your day, maybe about 20, 30 years ago in the military and having these kind of operations. Is it a much more hazardous and a much more training-intensive profession now than it used to be? That's the drone I was talking about.
Yes. With respect, while the drone technology cannot be said to be any technology globally, for our security forces, it is a relatively new introduction into their armory. It is for that reason that extreme care must be said to develop rules of engagement, to develop procedures, to do all the adequate training. I do not want to preempt what the trial, it will not be fair to the people that will be tried, but here I'm talking generally. When you have any equipment, it means you have to bring new, you have to develop new tactics, new training requirements, and all that and so forth. Drone, as opposed to a fixed-wing aircraft, whether helicopter, has certain advantages, but also disadvantages. The advantages that a drone has, first, is to save life. Like we call it pilotless, there is no pilot. So the worst that can happen is that the drone is shot down. That being the case, the most valuable item is the human life. So the human life is not there. The second advantage that drone has is that it is supposed to be more accurate. What do I mean more accurate? If you give it coordinates, longitude this, latitude this, I want you to hit it, it will hit it. But I say a big but confirming that latitude and the longitude you gave him is the correct one, is where the enemy is not the work of the drone, is the work of the human being. So if you give him latitude and longitude, where instead of bandits you have farmers, he's going to hit farmers. If you give him longitude and latitude where actually there are bandits, he's going to hit bandits. So that is the second advantage. It's more accurate than a pilot, controlled aircraft. The third advantage that drone has is what is called loiter or endurance. I don't want to speculate, but it is in our business. I know the drone that the army has is the Turkish Bayraktar drone. That one, for example, can loiter in the sky for 27 hours. I don't think you have any aircraft that can stay afloat 27 hours. So the drone gives you these advantages, but at the same time, the advantages also come with disadvantages. Because there is no man inside that drone who will say this is risky or the situation is changing. Once a drone is programmed by the controller on the ground, it may not be able to detect any changes in the situation. Whereas maybe a pilot flying very low might be able to change his mind or see some changes from what he's done. That is one disadvantage of drone. Secondly, drones, even in the armed forces that are advanced, they normally use it for what they call precision targeting, like we saw when Osama bin Laden was taken. You know, use it for precision targeting as opposed to area targeting. A drone is more effective or more useful for a target. I mean, an identified target rather than destroying an area. Destroying an area, even with the Americans in Afghanistan, in Iraq, they have problems of collateral damage. In fact, experts say there is almost a 30-something% chance that when you use a drone for an area attack, you are going to have collateral damage. So these are the advantages. So the point is that while drone is another advancement in the capacity that our armed forces has, it is good while using it, you understand both the advantages and the disadvantages. A third aspect is that the drone itself, like the fixed aircraft, it carries different kind of munitions, different kind of weapons. Sometimes it may be a bomb.
Could I come back to you?
It may be a missile.
I beg your pardon.
Yes.
Group Captain, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could I come back to you? Because we've had Professor Edmund from Enugu standing by for quite a while now. I'll come back to you. Good morning, Professor Edmund, and thank you for holding on.
Yeah, Mr. Sorry. Yes, are you with me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Unfortunately, you've kept me for long.
I'm so sorry, Professor, but because the group captain was explaining something technical, I didn't want to interrupt him out of turn.
That's by the way.
Yes.
No, it's okay. That's by the way. That's by the way anyway.
Please.
First of all, let me commend the military hierarchy for at least admitting that there was an error. I'm not a military man, neither am I a military expert, but as a civilian, in war or in wars, there are bound to be collateral damages. It's inevitable. Where I am against the military hierarchy is after admitting their mistake, went ahead to recommend court-martialing of those military boys. Let's say two wrongs cannot make a right. The damage has been done. It's a way. The military should not go back to the drawing board to forestall such a reoccurrence. Because by court-martialing, which might lead to either dismissal or death, as the case may be, you are thereby demoralizing other armed forces. You are demoralizing them in fighting this unconventional war. Because the war we are fighting in Nigeria is unconventional. It's not a conventional war. So one have to be very careful in this use of court-martialing in correcting a mistake that had already been done. Because if you court-martial those boys, somebody else gave them that order. You don't just court-martial those two people. What about the people that gave them the order? So this will be a chain reaction that inevitably will not augur well for the armed forces.
All right, then. Well, thank you very much, Professor Edmund, for calling in. Group Captain, among other things, the professor brought up a matter that you could quickly clear. Do all court-martials lead to either dismissal or death?
Thank you very much. I thank Professor Edmund for his concerns. It is a very concerning issue for anybody who has served in uniform, because like I said, it's the hazard of the job. With regarding court-martial, the Armed Forces Act has provided different scales on punishment, and as of now, we cannot, conclude what punishment the court-martial is going. And when we say court-martial, it's like even the civil court. That is to say, these people are still suspects or accused. They are not yet found guilty. It is even possible after the court-martial, they are not found guilty. The scale of punishment that will be given will be something, you know, the Armed Forces Act has scales of punishment ranging from a few days in detention up to and including death sentence. But I do not think we are looking at a case here that will go to the, to the jet order. But then I just wanted the professor to understand that there are scales of punishment. It may not be as high as we are saying, and here we may not even presume already that the court-martial is still possible. It is possible after a board of inquiry, a court-martial can exculpate somebody. And even after the court-martial, a court-martial is subject to appeal. And after the appeal is also subject to confirmation by the Armed Forces Board or the Army Council or whatever. There are other boards that will confirm this thing. So while we commiserate...
Is there incarceration within the scale between dismissal and death?
There is within the scale. I said, even including a few days detention in a military guard room, up to imprisonment, dismissal, it is scale. It is a scale from the minimum to the maximum. From the minimum to the maximum. But if my memory serves me right, the only place where you can be talking of death sentence is maybe in cases whether there is murder, real murder, there is an offense of murder in the armed forces, or treason. That is where you'll be having. But I think this is a professional mistake, if at all. It's a professional mistake. And yes.
Just before you go on, Group Captain, let me bring in Ada, who has also called in, lest I detain her for too long. Good morning, Ada. Go ahead, please. Ada, please go ahead now. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry from just what you speak. I'm happy you got a guest that has done so much justice to the topic. Before now, when I hear court-martial, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. Before now, when I used to hear of court-martial, and I'm sure most Nigerians think that way. Maybe that was why the professor who spoke first was talking like that. It doesn't really mean it's a death sentence. There are still rooms, for whatever. And we shouldn't shy away from court-martialing anybody. Even if a mistake, as he explained, if it's an excusable one, the punishment will be, less will be mild. All I want is that let's let the fair hearing. But all I want to say here is that I thank God that they commend the military for even acknowledging, that it's a mistake. That is, it's even a shooting ban in the first instance. So let them try and make sure that they give those two soldiers a fair hearing. And then so we won't have that, just like your guest mentioned about the June, it's new to us, kind of. Maybe they haven't been well trained on how to use it, because in America, I know they make use of June, but their mistakes are not one too many, because they are already, they are used to it. Okay. So we should give that opportunity as well.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Ada, for calling in. So, Group Captain, there are a ton of questions and people want to call in. We'll take a break now, but we'll come back, and I'll also engage you a bit on an expression that you have used repeatedly here, collateral damage. Whereas we don't want to prejudge or involve ourselves in the case, this definition of collateral damage, we'll look at that when we come back. Stay with us, please.